Zara woke before the sun, her small room dimly lit by the first streaks of morning light sneaking through the cracked window. At 19 she had learned the art of surviving on sheer will and determination. Her siblings, 3 younger children each with eyes reflecting both hunger and hope, slept soundly, unaware that their breakfast might be a meager bowl of porridge or, on harsher days, nothing at all. The town they lived in was small, dusty, and quiet, yet even in its simplicity, it carried its own harsh realities. Streets lined with peeling paint, abandoned shops, and the faint smell of smoke from early morning fires reminded Zara every day that life was not generous. Despite the hardships, Zara carried herself with a grace that belied the weight of her responsibilities. Her long, dark hair was usually tied back in a simple braid, her hands calloused from washing clothes, cleaning houses, and serving tables. Each day was a series of odd jobs: mending torn clothes, delivering groceries, sweeping dusty floors, and sometimes running errands for neighbors who paid her a few coins that barely made a difference. But she never complained. Her mind was always focused on survival, on keeping her siblings fed, clothed, and safe from the cruel world that seemed determined to grind them down. Zara's intelligence shone quietly in her interactions. She could negotiate with shopkeepers to give her extra rice, or figure out ways to stretch a few coins to feed 4 hungry mouths. Her sharp wit and quick thinking were tools she wielded like armor, shielding herself and her family from despair. But beneath this resilience lay vulnerability, a deep-seated longing for someone to notice her struggle, to validate her sacrifices, and to offer a glimpse of the life she dreamed of, a life where her children wouldn't have to scrimp, where she could study, laugh, and hope without the constant gnaw of fear and hunger. She often found herself walking along the narrow streets in the early morning, carrying a basket of eggs or a bundle of firewood, and staring at the houses of the wealthier townspeople. They lived in painted homes with gardens and laughter echoing from open windows. She imagined what it would feel like to step into one of those homes not as a servant but as someone welcomed, appreciated, and seen for who she was. Her heart ached at the contrast, but the longing never turned into despair. Zara believed in possibilities, even if she had no concrete reason to hope. Her life was not without kindness. The local baker sometimes gave her leftover bread, the grocer tossed in an extra apple, and neighbors would often smile warmly recognizing her tireless efforts. Yet these small acts were fleeting, like drops of water in a vast desert. Still, they were enough to keep her spirit alive, a reminder that humanity could exist even amidst hardship. The nights were the hardest. After her siblings were asleep, she would sit by the flickering candlelight, rubbing her aching hands, and allow herself a moment to dream. She imagined a different path, one where her struggles bore fruit, where she could walk confidently, hold her head high, and no one would look down on her or her siblings. She often thought about studying further, maybe learning a trade that could change their lives, or finding a place where her talents and kindness could flourish without the suffocating constraints of poverty. Yet fate, as she would soon discover, had already set wheels in motion that would drastically alter the course of her life. One ordinary day, filled with chores and errands, a chance encounter would occur, a meeting that would seem inconsequential at first but would carry consequences far beyond her imagination. Zara, strong but unsuspecting, intelligent but unaware of the forces converging around her, was about to step into a world she had only ever seen from afar in her daydreams. Even as she wiped the sweat from her brow, organized her small earnings for the day, and smiled faintly at her sleeping siblings, the universe seemed to pause, a quiet, unnoticeable moment, yet pregnant with possibility. It was in that pause, amidst the monotony of survival, that Zara's resilience and kind heart would collide with a destiny she had never anticipated. In the days to come, her life would twist in ways both bewildering and extraordinary, testing her courage, her intelligence, and her capacity for love and forgiveness. For now, though, she carried on with her morning routine, blissfully unaware of what was to come, but shining in her quiet brilliance. A young orphan who had learned to endure, to hope, and to dream, even when the world seemed determined to keep her small. This was the beginning of Zara's journey, a story of struggle, resilience, and the unforeseen turns of fate that awaited a girl whose heart was far bigger than the life she had been given. Every festival began the same way. The old drummer, bent with age and wisdom, would strike the first note, and the sound would ripple like wind through wheat. The crowd would cheer, the sky would seem to open, and the king would smile. But then, always then, the old man's eyes would flicker toward the throne, where a faint shimmer took shape beside King Baruti. For just a moment, like smoke curling from a dying fire, a silhouette appeared, delicate, still, unseen by all except the drummer. A child's figure, small, graceful, seated beside the king. The old man's heart always stuttered when he saw it. He had seen spirits before, ancestors, warriors, omens of drought or plague, but this presence was different. It carried warmth, sorrow, and longing, all woven into one. He never spoke of it openly, for who would dare whisper of ghosts near the throne? Yet every beat of his drum carried a message, one the king refused to hear: "You have forgotten her." King Baruti had been a great ruler, known for his fairness and strength. His armies had conquered neighboring lands, and his people adored him for his wisdom. But power demands sacrifice, and in his youth, Baruti had made one he had buried deep in memory. He had loved once, deeply, fiercely, and from that love had come a daughter, born under a blood moon, with eyes that gleamed like river light. She had been his firstborn, his heir by right. But her mother was from the forest clans, a people the royal council despised. To keep peace, Baruti had been forced to choose, and he had chosen the throne. The child had been sent away, her name erased from records, her songs forbidden. Over time the king's heart hardened, his memory reshaped by politics and pride. When he looked upon the world now, he saw only the weight of his crown, not the small singing child who once tugged his robe and called him father. But the drums remembered. Every night they were played, their rhythm carried her name. The spirits of the ancestors who danced between the beats refused to let her be forgotten. And so, when the sound filled the air, her presence rose too, sitting quietly beside the man who had erased her, watching him with a silence more powerful than any sound. Sometimes during feasts, when the drums grew wild and the dancers spun like flames, Baruti's gaze would drift to his side, and a strange chill would sweep through him. He would shift in his seat, his smile faltering for just a heartbeat, his eyes following something unseen. Then he would blink, shake his head and laugh it off, convincing himself it was nothing but the ghost of memory. But the old drummer knew better. He had been there the day the king's firstborn was carried away, wrapped in linen and silence. A song so soft, so sorrowful that even the wind had wept. He had promised her mother that the drums would remember, even if the king did not. And now, every time his hands met the skin of the drum, he felt her in the rhythm, a spirit of music waiting for the day when her song would be heard again. As the sun set behind the palace that night, and the drums began their evening call, the shadow appeared once more beside the throne, brighter than ever before. The old drummer's eyes filled with tears. The forgotten child was stirring. The song of remembrance had begun. Zara's day had been long and exhausting, the sun bearing down on the dusty streets, when she first noticed him. He wasn't like anyone she had seen in the small town before. His clothes were mismatched, brightly colored scarves draped over a worn coat, shoes that seemed too large and laced unevenly, and a hat that perched precariously on his head, tilting every time he moved. He walked with a peculiar rhythm, pausing suddenly to stare at a bird in flight or to mutter words she couldn't hear. Children pointed, whispering, and adults gave him wary glances, muttering about the madman wandering through the streets. Zara, carrying a basket of vegetables for her siblings, felt an unusual pull in her chest. There was something in the way he moved, an erratic yet strangely purposeful energy, that made her pause. Despite the curiosity and caution of the townspeople, she approached him carefully, her heart softening at the hint of loneliness she could almost see in his wide, alert eyes. He noticed her immediately, and for a moment, the world seemed to narrow down to the two of them. His gaze was intense, unflinching, yet there was a vulnerability there that made Zara instinctively want to reach out. "Hello," she said, her voice gentle. The man tilted his head, studying her as if he were analyzing something beyond her appearance, something deeper. Then, in a voice both shaky and melodic, he replied, "Hello. Do you see the colors in the wind?" Zara blinked, unsure what he meant, but she smiled. I think I do," she said, feeling oddly at ease despite his odd words. There was a sincerity in his tone that resonated with her own quiet, observant nature. Unlike the townspeople who either ignored him or mocked his behavior, Zara saw him. She saw not the eccentricity or the unpredictable movements, but the loneliness and the spark of intelligence hidden beneath the surface chaos. The man, whose name she would soon learn was Aiden, began to walk alongside her, matching her pace as she carried her basket through the crowded streets. The townspeople whispered and stared, some crossing themselves or muttering prayers under their breath. "Don't talk to him," one woman said to her child, shaking her head. "He's different." But Zara's curiosity outweighed the fear that normally gripped her in the presence of rumors and superstition. As they walked, Aiden spoke in fragmented sentences, jumping from topic to topic with astonishing speed. He would point at a pigeon perched on a roof and exclaim, "See! It counts the shadows." Then he would abruptly move on, muttering about rivers, trees, and the secret of footsteps. Zara listened patiently, offering small nods, encouraging words, and gentle laughter when his descriptions became particularly wild. In return, she noticed the faintest hint of gratitude in his eyes, a warmth that suggested she was the first person in a long time to truly listen. Despite his strange behavior, Zara felt an inexplicable trust forming between them. There was no pretense in him, no judgment. Just the raw, unpredictable pulse of a man who saw the world differently, a world she herself had longed to glimpse beyond the limits of poverty and routine. She felt a strange comfort in his company, a sense that he was somehow untethered from the harsh realities that had bound her all her life. The townspeople continued to whisper. Some said he had been seen wandering from city to city, speaking nonsense and leaving trails of odd inventions and curious sketches behind. Others swore he had been wealthy once, though no one could confirm it. Yet Zara didn't care about the gossip or the warnings. She was drawn to him, compelled by the same empathy and kindness that had always guided her. She sensed that behind the madness was a mind that understood complexity, a heart capable of seeing beauty in places most people overlooked. By the time they reached the small square, Zara felt as though hours had passed in mere minutes. She had discovered that in Aiden's eccentricities were glimpses of genius, moments of clarity hidden within chaos. She laughed softly at his strange observations and he laughed back, the sound melodic and strange like wind chimes caught in a sudden breeze. In that brief connection both felt a shift, an unspoken acknowledgement that their meeting was no accident, that perhaps destiny had a way of aligning even the most unlikely souls. As the day ended and the sun dipped behind the horizon, Zara watched him disappear into the shadows of the town's alleys, his figure wobbling and twisting like a surreal painting. She felt a pang of curiosity and longing, a wish to understand him more. Aiden, the so-called madman, had entered her life like a gust of wind, unpredictable yet undeniably powerful. And deep down she had a feeling that their paths had intertwined for reasons neither fully understood, setting the stage for events that would alter both their lives in ways neither could imagine. The morning light spilled through the cracked window of Zara's small room, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny fireflies in the air. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed, staring at the tiny white stick in her hands. Her fingers trembled and her heart raced as the reality sank in, two small lines clear and undeniable. She was pregnant. For a moment, the world around her seemed to tilt, as though the walls, the floor, and the very air were conspiring to unbalance her. Thoughts collided in her mind with dizzying speed. How had this happened? Could she manage this responsibility along with her siblings, her work, and the fragile stability she had carved out in a life that had never been kind? And most importantly, fear gripped her chest like a vice. Aiden, the man whose presence had brought comfort, warmth, and a fleeting sense of safety, was he ready? Could he even fathom the consequences of this moment? He had seemed fragile, lost in his own struggles. How would he respond to the news that she carried life within her? Zara's mind spun through scenarios both real and imagined. The neighbors, always whispering behind curtains, would surely notice something had changed. The rumors would spread before she even had a chance to tell anyone, casting judgment before understanding. The thought of the stares, the whispers, the shame, though undeserved, tightened around her like chains. Yet beneath the fear, there was a spark of resilience, a quiet, stubborn flame that had kept her alive through orphanhood, through poverty, through every hardship life had thrown her way. She had survived because she refused to break and she would not break now. The child she carried was a new beginning, a life separate from judgment, from fear, from expectation. And in that realization, courage began to swell inside her. She thought back to Aiden, to the strange, vulnerable man she had come to know. He had drawn her in with unpredictability, with honesty, with a longing that mirrored her own. He had been broken and she had been compelled to help, to support, to love in the purest, simplest sense. Could she now trust him with this truth? Could she summon the courage to tell him and see whether his care, his strange, quiet kindness, extended to this new life as well? As she paced the small room, running her hands over her abdomen, a sense of solitude enveloped her. The weight of decision, of consequences, pressed down with a gravity that made her knees weak. Every sound in the house, the ticking of the clock, the creak of the floorboards, the soft hum of the wind outside, seemed magnified, echoing the turmoil within. Society's judgment loomed large. She imagined neighbors shaking their heads, whispering about the orphan girl who had fallen into misfortune. She imagined her siblings asking questions she wasn't ready to answer. She imagined Aiden's reaction, whether it would be shock, fear, or, if she was lucky, understanding. And yet, even amid the storm of emotions, fear, uncertainty, and overwhelming responsibility, there was clarity. She would face this challenge as she had faced every other in her life. With resilience, with courage, with a steadfast refusal to let the world dictate her worth. This child, growing silently inside her, was not a mistake. It was a chance, fragile and fleeting, to shape a future from the chaos of the present. Zara took a deep breath and pressed her hand to her heart, feeling the faint, fluttering life within. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with potential heartbreak and struggle, but she would not turn away. She would confront fear, navigate judgment, and summon strength she didn't yet know she possessed. And when the moment came, she would speak to Aiden, not as a mother pleading, but as a woman standing firm in the truth of her life, ready to face whatever consequences lay ahead. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light across her room. Zara sat quietly for a long moment, the tiny stick clutched in her hand, a symbol of the life she now carried and the courage she would need to embrace it. The world outside continued in its oblivious rhythm, unaware of the storm within her heart. And in that quiet, pregnant pause, she understood something profoundly simple and terrifying. Her life had changed forever, and she would meet that change with the unbroken strength that had always defined her. Zara's mornings began earlier than ever, the first light of dawn filtering through the worn curtains of her tiny room. Already, the weight of responsibility pressed against her shoulders, heavier than any burden she had carried before. With a hand resting lightly on her abdomen, she moved through her small home, waking her younger siblings, preparing them for the day ahead. Their sleepy eyes looked up at her with trust and reliance, unaware of the storm brewing inside her own heart. Each step outside was accompanied by a heightened awareness. The townsfolk, ever observant, had begun to notice subtle changes: the curve of her belly, the cautious way she walked, the thoughtful expression that lingered on her face. Whispers followed her from the marketplace to the small shops where she worked, the murmur of curiosity and judgment curling in the air like smoke. Zara ignored most of it, though the sting of gossip occasionally bit at her confidence. She had learned early in life that survival often meant rising above the noise, and this was no different. Her workdays became a delicate balancing act. She cleaned homes, ran errands, and took on odd jobs wherever she could, each task demanding physical stamina she sometimes feared she no longer possessed. Evenings were spent preparing meals, sewing clothes, and planning for the child she carried, a life she had not anticipated but now embraced with quiet determination. With each chore, each act of care, she reminded herself that resilience was not merely surviving hardship but transforming it into purpose. Yet amid the labor and exhaustion, Zara found moments of reflection. She imagined the future with her child, painting vivid pictures of tiny hands reaching for the world, laughter echoing through a home she hoped to make safe. She wondered what kind of parent she would be, if she would have the strength to protect, to guide, to love unconditionally. The uncertainty pressed heavily on her, but so did hope, like a fragile flame that refused to be extinguished even in the harshest wind. At night, she often sat by the small window, moonlight bathing her face as she cradled her belly. The town was quiet, yet the echo of whispers and judgment lingered in her mind. She imagined conversations with her child one day, explaining that the world could be cruel, that people often misunderstand those they do not know, and that courage was the quiet, steady force that allowed one to keep moving forward despite fear. Each heartbeat reminded her that life had changed irrevocably, and yet she was learning to find balance in the chaos. The townsfolk's gossip, while biting, also revealed something unexpected: admiration. Some women began to nod at her in the marketplace, subtle acknowledgments of her determination and strength. Children watched her with wide, curious eyes, inspired by her unbroken spirit. Zara absorbed these small affirmations quietly, letting them bolster her resolve, even when she felt the exhaustion of the day in her bones. Even work that once felt mundane became infused with a new sense of purpose. She carried the knowledge that every coin earned, every chore completed, every small meal prepared was a step toward creating a future where her child would not know hunger or neglect. And though the weight of fear never fully disappeared, fear of judgment, of financial hardship, of the unknown, it became tempered by an ever-growing sense of agency. She was not merely reacting to life, she was shaping it, moment by moment. Zara also began to prepare mentally and emotionally for the presence of Aiden. The thought of telling him about the pregnancy brought both trepidation and faint hope. She rehearsed conversations in her mind, imagined his potential reactions, and steeled herself for whatever truth might emerge. Every day she reminded herself that while the world might be unpredictable, her strength was constant. In her quietest moments, she dreamed of a home filled with love and laughter, of a child who would know safety and acceptance, even if the path to that future was lined with difficulty. She pictured the simple joys, teaching a child to walk, to speak, to dream. She pictured nights of storytelling, mornings of sunlight spilling across the floor, and the resilience she had nurtured becoming a guiding light for another life. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, Zara often felt the exhaustion seep into her bones, but she also felt the subtle, powerful pulse of purpose. Life had shifted dramatically, but within that change she discovered a quiet kind of joy, the knowledge that despite uncertainty, despite fear, despite judgment, she was creating something enduring and beautiful. Each day was a testament to her courage, a rehearsal for the future she was determined to claim for herself and her child. And so, amid labor, whispers, and worry, Zara continued to move forward. Her life had changed irrevocably, yet she met each day with the same intelligence, kindness, and unyielding resilience that had always defined her. Every challenge became a note in the symphony of her life, each step a rhythm of determination, and each heartbeat a reminder that even in the face of uncertainty, hope and courage could flourish. The morning air felt heavier than usual as Zara made her way through the quiet streets of the town. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with the weight of responsibility, the flutter of excitement, and an undercurrent of fear she could never fully name. Yet, she had not anticipated the revelation that awaited her, a truth that would unravel every certainty she had held about Aiden. It began innocuously enough, with an invitation to meet him in the center of town. His usual eccentric mannerisms were gone, replaced by a calm, deliberate composure. The spark of unpredictability that had drawn her to him still lingered in his eyes, but there was now a new gravity, a quiet authority that commanded attention. Zara followed him silently, her curiosity mingling with unease. As they reached the outskirts of the town, the scene before her made her breath catch. Towering gates of steel, polished to perfection, opened into a sprawling estate that seemed more like a city than a residence. Gardens stretched endlessly, manicured to near perfection, and the faint hum of fountains filled the air with music. Horses, sleek and well-groomed, grazed in pastures that seemed to go on forever. Zara's eyes widened as she realized the magnitude of what she was witnessing. Aiden turned to her, his usual awkward smile softened into something more sincere. "I suppose this is the moment I owe you an explanation," he said, his voice calm, measured, and unlike the man she had first met in the crowded streets. He guided her through the grand halls, each room more extravagant than the last. Walls of glass revealed oceans of land, art collected from around the world, and technology she had only seen in magazines. Zara could hardly reconcile the image before her with the disheveled, mad man who had stumbled into her life weeks ago. He stopped in a library larger than the entire town's library combined, filled with books, artifacts, and devices that gleamed with unfamiliar sophistication. "I know this must be shocking," Aiden said, noticing her disbelief. "I am, or rather, I was raised to be invisible. Wealth, power, expectations, these are burdens I have never wanted to share with anyone. I wanted to be normal, if you can call it that." Zara's mouth opened, then closed, her mind spinning. Everything she had believed about him, the eccentricities, the late-night wanderings, the strange habits, now had a new context. His unpredictability, once confusing and slightly unnerving, was now seen in a new light, a carefully constructed shield to protect the parts of himself he feared the world would misuse. And yet, behind the wealth and authority, the same man who had needed her empathy and kindness still lingered. I don't know what to say," Zara finally managed, her voice trembling. She wanted to step back, to retreat to the simplicity of her own life, yet something deeper anchored her feet. "All this, it's more than I ever imagined." Aiden's expression softened. "I never meant to deceive you," he said quietly. "I wanted you to see me, not the fortune, not the name, not the expectations. Just me." He paused, letting the silence fill the grand hall. "And yet, I suppose fate has a sense of irony." Zara looked around, absorbing the weight of his world. She saw the contrast starkly. Her small, cluttered room with its worn furniture and the simplicity of her daily struggles stood worlds apart from the opulence surrounding her now. And yet, as her eyes met his, she realized the wealth could never fully define him. The man who had stumbled into her life, awkward and raw, was still the same man whose presence had ignited something in her heart. Questions and emotions tangled within her. Disbelief, admiration, fear, and something that dared to resemble hope. Could she trust him again after the half-hidden truths? Could she accept that a man of such wealth, who moved among the elite and powerful, could also carry the same vulnerability she had seen? And perhaps, most pressing of all, could she reconcile her feelings for the man she had loved as he was, with the man he truly was? Aiden stepped closer, gently taking her hand. "I don't expect you to understand everything right now," he said, eyes earnest, almost vulnerable. "But I hope you see that nothing has changed between us, except perhaps the circumstances. I am still me, still the man who values honesty, kindness, and, well, your presence in my life." Zara's heart pounded. The tension between disbelief and affection wove through her thoughts, leaving her suspended in a delicate balance. She realized that while wealth and status could shift the perception of reality, the connection they had formed was rooted in something deeper, something that neither fortune nor secrecy could erase. As she stood there, hand in his, Zara felt the first stirring of clarity. Her world had changed in ways she could never have foreseen, yet the bond that had grown between them, the empathy, the protection, the trust, remained. And in that moment, amid the grandeur of Aiden's hidden life, she understood that while circumstances could shock, true understanding and genuine connection were far more enduring. The days following Aiden's revelation felt both surreal and suffocating for Zara. She had walked through his world, marveled at its opulence, and yet, every step left her feeling strangely small, almost intrusive. The grandeur of the estate, the gleaming surfaces, the hushed servants moving like shadows, all of it reminded her that the life she had known was confined to tight streets, worn furniture, and the small triumphs of daily survival. And now Aiden's world threatened to swallow her completely. She wanted to trust him. She truly did. For weeks, they had shared laughs, whispered fears, and moments of tender vulnerability. But the sudden unveiling of his identity had left her unsure. The man who had been unpredictable, awkward, and deeply human now walked with a confidence that bordered on intimidating. Zara found herself questioning whether love, simple, raw, and authentic, could survive amid the glittering towers of wealth and expectation. Meanwhile, Aiden wrestled with his own storm of emotions. He wanted to bridge the gap between them, to show Zara that nothing had changed between the two of them. But each attempt felt clumsy, weighed down by the enormity of his secret. How could he explain the world of pressure, inheritance, and scrutiny that came with his fortune without overwhelming her? And even more pressing, how could he reconcile the mad persona that had drawn her in with the billionaire reality that now loomed between them? The town, as towns are wont to do, had caught wind of the strange couple. Whispers had grown into gossip, and gossip had taken a life of its own. Rumors painted Aiden as a manipulative playboy, a madman hiding behind wealth, and Zara as a naive girl dazzled by gold. Faces in the market turned to stare, voices murmured, and unsolicited advice reached her at every corner. Every glance felt like an accusation, every smile a taunt. Zara's heart ached as she realized that society's judgment weighed heavier than any personal struggle. One evening, as they sat in Aiden's study, the air thick with unspoken tension, Zara finally broke the silence. I don't know if I can exist in your world," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Everything is so different. I don't belong here, Aiden. And I don't know if you belong with someone like me." Aiden's eyes darkened with a mix of frustration and regret. "Zara, listen to me. None of this matters if you don't let it," he said, his voice low but firm. "I didn't reveal myself to scare you, to make you doubt. I wanted you to see who I am, everything, not just the mask I wore to appear harmless. I'm still the same man who laughed with you, who confided in you, who—" "I saw that man," Zara interrupted, tears welling in her eyes. "But now I see a stranger. Someone I can't reach. People talk, Aiden. They whisper, and suddenly I'm questioning everything. Your motives, my choices, whether I was ever anything but a convenience in your life." He reached for her hand, but she pulled back. "I don't need your wealth, Aiden. I never did. I need honesty, consistency, trust. And right now, I don't know if any of that exists in the world you come from." For the first time in days, Aiden felt powerless. His wealth, his resources, his influence, none of it could bridge the chasm that had grown between them. He realized that while money could build palaces and buy luxury, it could not manufacture faith, nor could it erase the wounds of uncertainty. And yet he could not let her go. Not when her presence had already reshaped his life, awakened something within him that no fortune could replicate. Days turned into weeks, and the tension only escalated. Misunderstandings bloomed like dark flowers. A single glance at a guest's compliment or a passing remark from a servant was twisted into suspicion. Zara's friends warned her to guard her heart. Aiden's advisors cautioned him to protect his reputation. Both of them struggled with the weight of expectations. Hers from society, his from inheritance. and the fragile bond they had built trembled under the pressure. Yet in the quiet moments, alone and away from prying eyes, glimpses of their connection remained. A shared laugh, a lingering touch, a soft glance across a room, tiny sparks that reminded them of the person beneath the wealth, beneath the gossip, beneath the misunderstandings. And both knew deep down that unless they confronted their fears, their pride, and the forces pulling them apart, the bond they had nurtured might wither entirely. By the end of the week, they faced each other in the grand library once more, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Zara's eyes, glossy with unshed tears, searched his. "Can we survive this, Aiden? Can we survive us?" He swallowed hard, the enormity of the question settling into his chest. "I don't know," he admitted honestly, "but I want to try. And I won't let anything, people, wealth, or fear, come between us again." It was not a promise of certainty, but a commitment to fight for each other. And as they stood there, hands almost touching, both felt the fragile pulse of hope, that love, even amid wealth, scandal, and misunderstanding, could still endure. The morning sun filtered through the tattered curtains of Zara's small apartment, but the warmth it offered did little to ease the storm raging inside her. Every corner of the room reminded her of the life she had built with her own hands, a life of struggle, resilience, and careful sacrifices for her younger siblings. And yet, the memory of Aiden's revelation, his world of wealth, power, and unexpected vulnerability, shadowed her thoughts like a persistent storm cloud. Zara paced the room, her heart heavy with indecision. Should she continue on the path she had always known, fiercely independent, enduring every hardship without asking for help? Or should she step into Aiden's world, where the comforts of wealth and security awaited, but at the cost of relinquishing a part of herself? The question felt impossible. She had always prided herself on autonomy, on knowing that she could survive without anyone's assistance. But now, survival alone seemed inadequate compared to the opportunity to nurture her unborn child in a world of stability, free from constant worry about bills, food, or shelter. Aiden, sensing her inner turmoil, chose to meet her in the quiet of the nearby park, a place untouched by gossip and judgment. He sat beneath the shade of a sprawling tree, hands nervously fidgeting, a rare vulnerability in his usually composed demeanor. "Zara," he began, voice soft, "I know this is difficult. I understand why you hesitate. I never asked you to step into my world blindly." Zara's eyes searched his, trying to decipher whether his concern was genuine or a subtle expectation. "It's not just about stepping into your world, Aiden," she said, her voice quivering. "It's about losing mine. Everything I've built, every struggle I've endured, it's part of who I am. And if I leave it behind, what does that make me?" Aiden leaned forward, sincerity etched into his expression. "You don't have to leave who you are. Your strength, your courage, your independence, they're the very things I admire. The world I have isn't meant to trap you, it's meant to protect you, to give our child a future without fear. But you must choose what feels right for you, not what you think I want." Her chest tightened with conflicting emotions. The weight of his words pressed on her heart. She wanted to trust him, to believe that love could exist without compromise. Yet the shadow of doubt lingered. Was wealth a blessing or a gilded cage? Could she love him for who he was, or would the world of privilege eventually erode the bond they shared? And most importantly, could she reconcile her need for autonomy with the undeniable pull of his devotion? They sat in silence for a long while, broken only by the rustling leaves and distant laughter of children playing. The choice seemed monumental, a crossroads where love, duty, and morality intertwined. Zara thought of her siblings, of the sacrifices they had all endured, and of the life she wanted for her unborn child, a life of possibility, not constraint. And yet, the thought of surrendering even a fraction of her independence felt like a betrayal of everything she had fought for. Aiden reached out, gently taking her hand. "I don't want you to choose me because of fear or because of comfort, or because you think you have no other options," he said. "I want you to choose us because you believe in what we can build together, because you trust me, because you feel safe not only in wealth but in love." Zara's eyes welled with tears as she realized the depth of his sincerity. For the first time she saw him not as a man of fortune, not as the eccentric stranger, but as someone who understood vulnerability, someone who valued her not for what she lacked or gained but for who she was. The moral dilemma remained: independence versus security, freedom versus trust, fear versus love. Yet in that quiet moment, Zara recognized that the choice did not have to erase her identity. Love could be a partnership, a blending of worlds without losing oneself. Finally, she exhaled, letting a sense of clarity seep through the tension. She looked into Aiden's eyes and saw not only wealth and privilege but also the honesty of a man willing to surrender pride, to meet her on equal ground. Her decision would not be about surrender but about balance, about trusting in both her strength and his sincerity. "I'll try," she whispered, voice steady despite the tears. "I'll try to believe that love can hold both of us without breaking either of us." Aiden's face softened, relief and admiration mingling in his expression. "That's all I ask," he said gently, squeezing her hand. "Together we'll figure out the rest." In that moment, the storm inside Zara quieted, replaced by the tentative hope that love, honesty and trust could bridge even the widest gaps, and that her choice, made from courage rather than fear, might lead to a future brighter than either of them had ever imagined. The afternoon sun bathed the town in a warm, golden glow as Zara walked along the familiar streets, her thoughts still swirling with the recent week's turmoil. The town hadn't changed, yet everything felt different. Her heart was heavier with responsibilities, yet lighter with the possibility of a future redefined. She had faced fear, doubt, and uncertainty, but now a quiet strength had taken root, growing alongside her anticipation for the life she carried. Aiden stood waiting by the old fountain where they had first talked about the impossible choices life had thrown at them. His posture was tentative, hands clasped in front of him, eyes searching hers with a mixture of hope and apology. When he saw her approach, a flicker of relief passed over his face. "Zara," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of the man who had endured his own internal battles, "thank you for coming." She studied him carefully, noticing the subtle shifts, the steadiness replacing earlier awkwardness, the sincerity radiating from every expression. He wasn't just a billionaire, nor the eccentric man she had first known. He was a man who had faced himself, his fears, and was now willing to stand beside her in honesty and partnership. "I had to come," she said finally, her voice calm but firm. "Not just for us but for the child. And for me. I needed to see that the choices I make don't erase who I am." Her gaze softened as she continued. "I've learned that love isn't about surrender, it's about trust, respect, and sharing the weight of life together." Aiden stepped closer, relief and admiration mingling in his eyes. "I've made mistakes," he admitted, voice low, tinged with remorse. "I wasn't always aware of the pressures you faced. I hid behind my wealth, my eccentricities, my own fears. But I promise you now, my support will never be conditional on who you are or what you've endured. I am here fully for you and our child, for our life together." Zara's chest swelled with emotion. For so long she had carried the burdens alone, responsibility for her siblings, survival through endless odds, and the weight of her unborn child's future. But now, facing Aiden's honesty, she recognized that partnership could exist without compromising her independence. Strength and love could coexist, blending rather than colliding. They walked together to the riverside, a place where Zara had often reflected in solitude. The flowing water seemed to mirror the healing taking place between them, a current of understanding, patience, and mutual respect. Aiden reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers with a quiet certainty. "I want us to move forward together," he said. "Not as one overpowering the other, but as two people facing life side by side." Zara nodded, tears of relief and joy glistening in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "I need to trust you and I want you to trust me too. Our lives will be complicated, yes, but that doesn't mean we can't create something beautiful from it." For the first time they allowed themselves to breathe fully, to let go of guilt, fear and judgment. The town around them seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them and the sense of possibility blooming between their hearts. Zara felt her confidence solidify, not just in her relationship with Aiden but in herself. She knew that challenges would arise as they always do, but she also knew that she had the inner strength and the shared commitment with Aiden to face them. The bond between them deepened as they discussed the future, the upbringing of their child, the merging of their lives without surrendering their identities, and the shared responsibilities that would define their partnership. Each word, each promise, solidified trust and laid the foundation for a life balance between love and independence. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, Zara felt a serene certainty she had never known before. She glanced at Aiden, whose gaze reflected the same understanding and devotion. In that shared silence, the emotional closure they both longed for finally took root. Mistakes of the past were acknowledged, lessons internalized, and the path forward illuminated, not by wealth or circumstance but by the sincerity of their hearts. Hand in hand they left the riverside, stepping into a world that suddenly seemed full of possibility. Whatever challenges awaited, they would face them together, Partners equals bound by love, trust, and the unwavering courage to shape their own destiny. The resolution wasn't a simple triumph. It was the start of a shared life built on honesty, mutual respect, and the knowledge that even in the face of uncertainty, they could find balance and joy together.